entitled "Karen Embarrassed My 10-Year-Old Son in Public." So, I compiled a video of her rants, shared it on our town's subreddit, making it to the local news, leaving her completely humiliated. The fluorescent lights of Walmart buzzed overhead as I pushed my shopping cart down the cereal aisle, my 10-year-old son, Ethan, trailing behind me. It was a typical Saturday morning, the store bustling with weekend shoppers. I was focused on my grocery list, barely noticing the woman approaching from the opposite direction until Ethan's startled yelp caught my attention. "Watch where you're going, you little brat." The shrill voice cut through the ambient noise of the store. I whipped around to see a middle-aged woman with highlighted blonde hair glaring down at my son. Her perfectly manicured hand gripped the handle of her shopping cart, so tightly her knuckles had turned white. I'm sorry," Ethan stammered, his eyes wide with shock. "I didn't mean to." "You didn't mean to what?" The woman sneered, cutting him off. "Didn't mean to walk around like an idiot, not paying attention to where you're going?" She gestured dramatically at a small puddle on the floor near her feet. "Look what you've done. You made me spill my coffee all over the floor." I quickly assessed the situation. Ethan had been walking close behind me, well out of the way of other shoppers. This woman, this Karen, had clearly bumped into him herself, likely while she was distracted by her phone. The spilled coffee was her own fault. "Ma'am," I began, trying to keep my voice calm. "I'm sure it was just an accident." "There's no need to." "An accident?" Karen scoffed, her voice rising. "More like negligent parenting. You should teach your kid some manners before letting him loose in public." By now, we'd drawn the attention of several nearby shoppers. I could feel their eyes on us as Karen continued her tirade. "This is what's wrong with kids these days," she ranted, addressing the growing crowd. "No respect. No accountability. Just look at him." She pointed an accusing finger at Ethan, who had shrunk back behind me, probably spends all day glued to his video games, can't even walk through a store without causing trouble. "That's enough," I said firmly, placing a protective hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You're the one who needs to watch where you're going. Leave my son alone." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Oh, so you're one of those parents. No wonder your kid's such a menace. I bet you let him run wild at home too, don't you? What's next? Is he going to start shoplifting? Vandalizing property?" "Mom," Ethan whispered, tugging at my sleeve. I could feel him trembling. "Can we go, please?" I was about to agree to grab our cart and leave this nightmarish encounter behind us. But Karen wasn't finished. "That's right. Run away," she taunted. "But don't think this is over. I'm going to speak to the manager about this. They need to know what kind of hooligans are terrorizing their customers." Something in me snapped. The growing crowd, the vicious accusations, and most of all, the fear in my son's eyes. It was too much. Before I could stop myself, I stepped forward, getting right in Karen's face. "Listen here, you miserable excuse for a human being," I hissed, my voice low and dangerous. "You're the one terrorizing people. My son did nothing wrong, and you've humiliated him in front of all these people for no reason. You're a bully, plain and simple." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, clearly not used to being confronted. But I wasn't done. "I've seen you around town," I continued. "Always causing scenes, always making people miserable. Well, guess what? It ends now. I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are." With that, I turned on my heel, took Ethan's hand, and marched out of the store, leaving our abandoned cart and a stunned Karen in our wake. The drive home was quiet, Ethan staring out the window as I white-knuckled the steering wheel. My mind raced, replaying the incident over and over. I thought of all the times I'd heard about this woman's antics, yelling at baristas, harassing retail workers, making scenes at PTA meetings. She'd been a thorn in our community's side for too long. "Mom?" Ethan's small voice broke through my thoughts. Are you mad at me? My heart shattered. Oh, honey, no, I said, reaching over to squeeze his hand. I'm not mad at you at all. That woman was completely out of line. You did nothing wrong. But she said. I know what she said, I interrupted gently. And she was wrong. You're a wonderful, kind boy, and I'm so proud of you. Ethan nodded, but I could tell he was still shaken. As we pulled into our driveway, I made a decision. This Karen had crossed a line, and it was time someone did something about it. Over the next few days, I put my plan into action. I started small, keeping an eye out for Karen whenever I was running errands or out in town. It didn't take long to spot her signature blonde highlights and perpetual scowl. I first caught her at the local coffee shop, berating a young barista for apparently making her latte wrong. I discreetly pulled out my phone and started recording, capturing her raised voice and aggressive gestures. The poor barista looked close to tears as Karen demanded to speak to a manager. The next day, I saw her at the post office, cutting in line and snapping at an elderly man who dared to object. Again, I recorded the incident, making sure to capture the shocked and disgusted expressions of the other customers. As the week went on, I became bolder in my pursuit. I followed Karen to the grocery store, the bank, even the local park. Everywhere she went, she left a trail of misery in her wake, and I captured it all on video. One particularly egregious incident occurred at the library. Karen was loudly complaining about the incompetence of the librarians when a young mother politely asked her to keep her voice down, gesturing to her sleeping infant. Karen's reaction was explosive. How dare you tell me to be quiet, she shrieked, her face turning an alarming shade of red. This is a public space. If you can't handle a little noise, maybe you should stay home with your brat. The mother, shocked into silence, clutched her now crying baby to her chest. Other library patrons looked on in horror as Karen continued her rant, oblivious to the distress she was causing. I felt a mix of disgust and triumph as I recorded the scene. This was exactly the kind of behavior I needed to expose. By the end of the week, I had amassed hours of footage. I spent a sleepless night editing it down to a concise but damning 10-minute video. The montage showcased Karen's worst moments, her verbal abuse, her entitlement, her complete disregard for others. I made sure to include snippets of conversations I'd overheard, where Karen boasted about getting employees fired or threatening to sue businesses that didn't bend to her will. With shaking hands, I prepared to upload the video to our town's subreddit. But first, I took several precautions. I created a new email address using a fake name and used it to set up a throwaway Reddit account. I made sure to use a VPN to mask my IP address and location. I even went so far as to upload the video to a new YouTube account, again created with false information, before linking it in my Reddit post. I included a detailed description of the incident with my son, as well as a call for others to share their own Karen stories. I was careful to write in a style different from my usual one, avoiding any phrases or mannerisms that might identify me. Then, heart-pounding, I hit post. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, the video had hundreds of upvotes and comments. People from all over town chimed in with their own Karen encounters, each story more outrageous than the last. She got my daughter fired from her first job for not accepting an expired coupon. I saw her screaming at a waiter on my anniversary dinner, ruined the whole night. She tried to get my dog put down because it barked at her once. The stories kept coming, painting a picture of a woman who had terrorized our community for years. Some people expressed shock, having only experienced Karen's polite public persona. Others shared their relief that someone had finally exposed her true nature. I watched the thread explode with a mix of anxiety and satisfaction. Part of me wanted to join in to share more details, but I resisted the urge. Anonymity was my shield, and I couldn't risk compromising it. To my surprise, the story took on a life of its own. A few days after my post, I was watching the local news when a familiar face appeared on the screen. The anchors were discussing a viral video that had emerged from our town's subreddit, showing a local woman's repeated instances of public misbehavior. I watched, heart racing, as clips from my video played on the screen. The anchors discussed the impact of such behavior on local businesses and individuals, framing it as a cautionary tale about the consequences of unchecked entitlement. They even interviewed a few local business owners and residents who shared their own encounters with Karen. Thankfully, there was no mention of the video's creator. The news station seemed content to focus on the content of the video itself and its impact on the community. I breathed a sigh of relief, grateful for my earlier precautions. The aftermath was swift and severe. Within days, Karen's name and face were plastered across social media. Local businesses began posting about their right to refuse service policies, with some explicitly banning her from their establishments. Her workplace, a real estate agency where she'd apparently been a top seller, released a statement distancing themselves from her behavior and announcing an internal investigation. I watched it all unfold from behind my computer screen, alternating between feelings of vindication and unease. Had I gone too far? Was this justice? Or had I stooped to Karen's level by publicly humiliating her? My doubts were silenced when Ethan came home from school one day, his eyes shining with excitement. "Mom, guess what?" he said, practically bouncing. "Remember that mean lady from the store? Well, Tommy said his mom saw her on the news and now everyone knows how bad she is. He said I was brave for standing up to her." Seeing the pride in my son's eyes, the lingering guilt I felt evaporated. I had done this to protect him, to show him that bullies don't always win. And from the sounds of it, the lesson had stuck. But the story wasn't over yet. A few days later, as I was leaving the grocery store, a different one from the initial incident, I quite literally ran into Karen. She looked different. Her normally perfectly coiffed hair was disheveled and her designer clothes had been replaced by a plain tracksuit. The spark of recognition in her eyes quickly turned to fury. "You," she snarled, grabbing my arm. "You're the one who ruined my life." I jerked away from her grip, my heart racing. "I didn't ruin your life," I retorted. "You did that all on your own. I just showed everyone who you really are." Karen's face contorted with rage. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she hissed. "I've lost my job. My friends won't talk to me. I can't go anywhere in this town without people glaring at me or whispering behind my back. All because of your stupid video." For a moment, I felt a twinge of pity. But then I remembered the look on Ethan's face that day in the store, the fear and shame in his eyes. My resolve hardened. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to bully a 10-year-old child," I said coldly. "Or before you treated every service worker in this town like dirt. Actions have consequences, Karen. It's time you learned that." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving her sputtering in the parking lot. As I drove home, I couldn't shake the image of her desperate, angry face. Had I really done the right thing? The question plagued me over the next few weeks as the furor over the Karen video slowly died down. Life in our town began to return to normal. Or a new normal, at least. Karen was notably absent from her usual haunts and rumors swirled about her future plans. I tried to put it out of my mind to focus on my family and my work. But the nagging doubt remained. Had I taken things too far? Should I have found another way to address the situation? My answer came unexpectedly during a PTA meeting at Ethan's school. I was half listening to a discussion about fundraising ideas when I heard a familiar name mentioned. "And ever since that Karen situation, we've had a lot more parents volunteering," one of the committee members was saying. "I think people realized how important it is to be involved in the community in a positive way." Murmurs of agreement filled the room. Another parent spoke up. "My daughter works at the cinema and she said customer behavior has improved dramatically. It's like everyone's on their best behavior now, afraid of being the next Karen." As the conversation continued, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Maybe my actions had been extreme, but they had sparked a change in our community. People were more aware of their behavior, more considerate of others. And isn't that what I had wanted all along? The final chapter of the Karen saga came a month later. I was at the park with Ethan when I overheard a conversation between two women on a nearby bench. "Did you hear about Karen?" one asked. "Apparently she's moving, selling her house and everything." "Good riddance," the other replied. "After everything that came out about her, I'm surprised she stuck around this long." I watched Ethan on the swings. His face lit up with joy and felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that Karen would no longer be a threat to our community. Satisfaction that justice in some form had been served. But also a twinge of regret for the extreme measures I had taken. As we left the park, Ethan's small hand in mine, I realized that this experience had changed me as much as it had changed our town. I had taken a stand against injustice. Yes, but at what cost? The line between righteousness and cruelty, I now understood, was thinner than I had ever imagined. In the end, as I watched Karen's moving truck draft our house a week later, I didn't feel the triumph I had expected. Instead, I felt a quiet resolution. To teach Ethan about kindness and empathy. Yes, but also about forgiveness and second chances. To show him that standing up for what's right doesn't always mean tearing others down. As the truck disappeared around the corner, taking with it the last remnants of the Karen saga, I turned back to our home. To the life we had built here. The world wasn't perfect. There would always be difficult people. Always be injustices to face. But for now, in our small corner of it, there was peace. And that, I decided, was enough.